Welcome to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast, where we empower women to own their power, create influence and impact, and live life unapologetically AF. It's time to leverage your expertise, resources, and relationships to build your business, brand, and badassery. So just click subscribe and let's get it. I'm your host, Kelly Charles Collins. Welcome to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast. My guest today is Geraldine Hogan. Geraldine knows the challenges that accompany major career moves. She is a former elementary school teacher, licensed attorney, and retired judge. And in her book, Career Moves for Teachers and Other Professionals, Strategies for a Successful Job Change, Geraldine provides techniques to assist readers with changing jobs or transitioning to a different career. Geraldine, my friend of 20-something years, welcome to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast.
Kelly, thank you so much for having me.
You know, it's so funny. Before we came on, we were just laughing and saying, you know, who would have thought so many years ago when you were in the state attorney's office and I was a public defender's office that we would be sitting here doing this, right? Having this conversation about, you know, all of the amazing things that you have been doing. It's just so weird. And we were saying that time flies, right?
Exactly. Absolutely.
It's just so amazing. And, you know, one of the things that you mentioned is my son and, you know, him being 30, and you think about how we've come through all of this together, and you don't realize like how long people have been in your life, right? And that they've been through so many things with you. And then when you see that your children are now adults, that when you knew them when they were little kids, that's such an amazing journey to have been on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Geraldine, I wanted to have you on because I think that you are doing something that's so amazing right now in terms of helping women and particularly teachers with making transitions, right? And as I mentioned, you were a teacher, then you became an attorney, and you were a judge. So you know something about transitioning. So before we get into your book and, you know, what it is that you want women to know, give my listeners just a little bit of your history and how did you go from, you know, being a teacher, what did you teach, and what made you then transition into being an attorney and then being a judge?
Kelly, you know, from the time that I was a child, from as early as I could remember, I wanted to be a teacher. And I knew I would grow up to be a teacher. And it's interesting because when I tell people that I transitioned from teaching to being an attorney, many people think that, what did you teach? Did you teach, you know, history? Did you teach high school? Did you teach American government? So when I say no, I taught kindergarten, first grade, and second. So it's such a difference. But what happened, and it's interesting that we're having this conversation now, because I think it was only recently that I could actually say, I finally realized why I no longer wanted to teach. The first 6 or 7 years, I thought I would teach forever. And then one day I was on my way to work and it was like, I cannot do this anymore. I don't want to do this. And I realized, and I only realized this recently, I was listening to one of Simon Sinek's audiobooks, and it taught, you know, how he writes about start with why and finding your why. And one of the things that I did in listening to that book, I realized that I became a teacher because I wanted to help children. I wanted to build their self-esteem. It was more about working with children and enhancing the quality of their life. I thought I would be so nice and so sweet because our teachers were a little bit mean and rough. And I said, when I grow up and I become a teacher, I'm going to be really nice to my children. And I just had all these ideas. But the reality is teaching is more about teaching, meeting standards, and pushing kids sometimes who are not even ready to reach certain standards. And the kids that I worked with, for the majority of the kids that I worked with, they had no problems because most of them came from homes where their parents would work with them and make sure that they would succeed. And it didn't take me long to realize that a child's success is based more on their parent and their home than it is me as a teacher. And the children that would keep me up at night, the ones that I would lay in bed thinking, what can I do differently? How can I help them more? Those were the children that really tugged at my heart. And I realized it's only so much that I could do. So when I made the decision to transition, I knew it was time for me to go, and I made a decision to go. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do something different. And when I started going through the process of researching, what do I want to do next? I was called to jury duty. And as I sat there on jury duty, it was actually a criminal trial. And we were talking about how we both got our start in criminal law. And I was sitting there thinking, I think I could do that. And by the end of the trial, I knew I could do it. It was like, that's it. I'm going to be an attorney. This is my calling. And it's so interesting because a lot of people don't see the connection, but there really is a connection, especially when you start with jury trials. Because you start with telling stories, you start with putting together the facts of the case in a way that the jurors will understand. And that's really kind of what I was doing as a teacher, telling stories, because I taught young children. So I was always reading and telling stories. So it kind of was a fit for me.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I transitioned from teaching to the legal profession.
Well, I'm glad to know, Geraldine, that I'm not the only one who was like, yeah, I could do that. Right. Because yeah, sure. It happened to me because a friend that I went to high school with, he started talking about the fact that he was going to go to law school. And I was getting my MBA at the time, and I didn't know what was next. And so he started talking about law school, and I used to go visit the courthouse next to the trust company that I worked for. And I was like, oh yeah, I could do that. Right. And so, just like you, was never on the radar. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't a lifelong dream, but I just knew that that was something that I would enjoy doing. Right. To be in a trial. And you got lucky. Could you actually get to serve on the jury the entire time? Or I
did. So I was actually sitting there the whole time thinking, oh no, I had a long time, that whole entire day, going through the evidence, going through the testimony of the witnesses, the whole jury experience and deliberating the facts of the case. So by the time that day was done, I knew that would be what I would do.
I am so jealous.
No, of course I had to research what it actually took in order to be an attorney. So I always knew I would go back to school. And it's interesting, I already had a master's degree in education because I really thought that I would be teaching forever. But when I looked into, I was also considering getting a doctorate degree in teaching on the college level. And I had the opportunity to compare working on a doctorate degree compared to law school. A definite 3 years, you either make it or you don't, and take your test and keep it moving, as opposed to doing a dissertation, defending a dissertation, maybe never getting the dissertation. So the more research I did, law school just became more and more appealing.
Yeah. And I say I'm jealous because I have always wanted to be on a jury. Because trying cases, when you try cases, you just want to know what is happening back there, right? And I've had jurors tell me stuff that they're doing. I had a 4-person when I was a public defender, and she came out and she said, "Can I talk to you?" And I said, "Sure." They had just found my client guilty, but I was like, "Sure." And she was like, "I just want you to know, every day we waited to see what you would wear." And I'm like, lady, you pay attention to the evidence. You're paying attention. But, it was interesting because at first I was like, really? That's what you were paying attention to? But then it also taught me a lesson, right, about showing up, right? And how to make sure, because you never know what people are paying attention to when you're in a space. And so that was a lesson for me to know, okay, so there was something about my clothing, and, people think, well, they're paying attention to your clothing, but we know, like, for jurors, if you can get them to like you, because that's why we tell the stories and we do that stuff, you get them on your side, then, they might be more likely, to listen to what you're saying. So Geraldine, and if you don't mind sharing, you could just share the range of age, but how old were you, or where were you in your life when you decided to stop teaching and go to law school?
I was 37 when I started law school, 40 when I graduated.
Yeah.
So at age 40, I started an entirely different career.
Yeah.
Actually, started with law school, but I actually when I graduated, I was 40.
Yeah. And the reason I asked that, because as you're talking about, as we go into talking more about the transitioning, I think that that's an important part of the story, because some people think, oh, I'm too old. Oh, I can't do that now. Oh, I've already had one career, right? And so I would love for you, as we're talking about transitions, to really talk about that there's no better time than the present, whatever age that is. And how long when you started as a state attorney, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then how long did you practice before you actually got on the bench?
I want to say maybe 5 years.
Okay.
I think it was maybe 5 or 6 years, maybe a little bit longer. I actually never counted. I would have to count back to see. It may have been a little bit more than that.
Oh, okay.
Actually, wait a minute. I can count this way. I would say it may have been closer to 8 or 9 years.
Okay.
8 or 9 years.
And what, you were a judge in workers' comp?
Yes.
Or workers' compensation, I should say the word out loud so that everyone knows. And when you are serving on the bench in workers' compensation, what does that mean? Like, what type of law are you practicing? Who comes before you as a judge?
Workers' compensation cases all go before workers' compensation judges. So those are the only types of cases that I would hear as a workers' compensation judge. The cases that came before me were workers' compensation cases that went into litigation. So if someone got hurt at work and there was either a dispute as to whether or not the accident occurred, whether or not the injury that they are seeking medical treatment for occurred, or if there is an injury, whether it was related to the work accident, all those are the types of issues that I would try. Also, whether or not the person had a compensable, what we call compensable injury, but perhaps the money that they received, they may have been entitled to a portion of their wages, but the injured worker may say that those funds, the money that he or she received, was not accurately accounted for.
Yeah.
So, were they getting the right amount? Was it for the correct number of weeks? That kind of thing. So there are a lot of issues that can be litigated in workers' compensation claims. Normally, people get hurt, they receive benefits, and the cases will never go before a judge. But for those that do, it's because something is contested.
And Geraldine, how did you go from being a state attorney, so dealing with criminal cases, to becoming a workers' compensation judge? Because that's generally not not the path. So how did, most people end up in county court, circuit court. How did you end up being a workers' compensation judge?
That's interesting. You think becoming a lawyer was interesting. I actually wanted to transition from criminal. I knew I did not want to continue to do criminal law. And every year we get our statement from the Florida Bar. And there's a list of sections, special sections that are on there, and we could decide what section we want to join, if any.
Right.
And I was looking at that, trying to decide what other area of law would I want to practice. And I said, I want to do something where there would always be work. And I thought of employment law, and I saw workers' comp. So I joined both sections, the workers' compensation section and the employment law section. And I said, I'll just see which one, where will I get a job first? And that will determine which area that I go into. And I happened to get a job in workers' compensation first, and I went into workers' compensation law.
Well, Geraldine, you're like me in terms of, okay, whatever. Which one is it? Yeah, let's go there, right? But that, and you were on the bench for how long?
12 years.
Wow. Yeah. And so being a judge, because I've never been a judge, What was that like? What is it like to actually be a sitting judge?
For me, it was a job. It like probably the hardest one I ever had, because then workers' comp is a little different than what we saw in criminal and even in civil cases, where you can, determine, make rulings on the law and then give the case to a jury. And in criminal, sometimes we have bench trials, and obviously in juvies, we always have bench trials. And those were the ones that I enjoyed the most, the ones where I didn't have to pick the jury, because that was always so time consuming. In workers' compensation, the judges are the finder of fact, in addition to being to determining the appropriate law to apply to the case and to the facts of the case. So it would require, after each trial, it would require reading deposition transcripts, medical records, and the trial transcript of the testimony that was provided. So it was very, very intensive from start to finish, from the time you're actually presiding over the case at hearing, and in addition to what happens afterwards. So it's very time consuming. But the thing that I really enjoyed about workers' compensation is that it's very law intensive. So you have to look at the facts, but the law is going to govern, and it's very straightforward. It's mostly statutory, although we do have cases, as in every other area of the law, that interprets the statute. But it's more about facts and law, not too much about opinions, or feel like a jury can go in and totally disregard totally not look at any fact. They could, they could be swayed by someone's, emotions, the tears, the cry, the whole gamut. But when it's just between the facts and the law, and you can't really rely on your opinions or what you think, it's very structured. So I really enjoyed the structure of workers' compensation law.
Yeah, I didn't realize that that you had so much of a role in doing every bit of it, right? So
Exactly.
Because I never practiced in workers' compensation, so I didn't realize that the judges had so much to do after, right? Once you preside over the case, it's sort of like as an arbitrator, doing all of that, and then you still have to go back and read all of the stuff. But I didn't realize that that was the same for you. And so when you retired from the bench, was it just time for you to retire, or that's something that you just consciously made a decision that you wanted to transition and do something else?
Every 4 years, I had to go through the reappointment process. So when the reappointment process came up, and I received, I always get an email from the deputy chief judge out of Tallahassee saying, let me know if you're going to retire or not retire. And I was also in the process, my mother had passed away, and there were just several things that I had to do in terms of dealing with her accounts, and I was constantly going back and forth to the bank. And one of the bankers said to me, she said, "Why don't you retire?" Because I was turning 60, I was 62 years old. Okay. And for the state of Florida, you could retire at 62. Now, keep in mind, I had taught for over a decade. So I was in the same Florida retirement system as a teacher as I was as a judge.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't really think, I knew that I would only do one more commission. So I knew that, I only intended to do one more anyway. But when she said that, I actually sat down and I looked at where I was financially. And I told her I couldn't retire at that time because my commission wasn't up. Mm-hmm. But when it was up, then I said, you know what? I felt that I had enough energy to do one more thing, like to go hard one more time before I really, really retired. Yeah. And that's what I wanted to do. So I decided not to apply for another commission and to just retire and see what happens. Yeah. And that's kind of what I did.
Yeah. And what is that one thing, Geraldine, when you were thinking like, there is one more thing that I can go really, really hard on? What was that one thing that you were thinking?
First, I wanted to write a book. I had been thinking about doing that for a while. And I thought in my mind that I really wanted to do a course or something with teachers to help them transition when they knew it was time to do so. I've had several teachers to approach me and tell me that they would ask, how did you make that transition? And how did you get the courage? Like, how did you get the nerve to do it? And I'm not talking people who are just saying it in passing. I'm talking people who will just actually break down and cry because they knew that it was time for them to transition to something else. And yet they were afraid to take that next step. And I always said I wanted to do something to help them, because when you're teaching, especially when you're teaching young children and you know it's time for you to go, you need to go. That's not a job where you're, if you're working with adults and attorneys, you can, and attorneys, we can be miserable forever, but you're not gonna really destroy someone in the same way that you will when you're working with children, especially young children. So I always said if I could, do something to help people to know that there are options, that you're not stuck, that if you know it's time for you to move on to something else, do it. And that's what I've been working on. That was why I wrote the book. And it's why we had talked a little before, and I said I really wanted to do a course, but the more I think about it, I think it would be something a little bit more in addition to actually doing the course. So that's kind of where I am right now.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say, when you're dealing with the children and it's time to go, then you need to go, because how we think shows up in our behavior and our words. And as you said, with adults, but even sometimes like as adults, we need to go too. But I think we don't realize sometimes like the things that we say, or even just how we show up, right? How that impacts children. And so when these teachers are talking to you, Geraldine, and, they are crying, right? Because teaching is a thankless position, profession, and it's a very hard profession. What are they afraid of in terms of transitioning?
I think it's really a reality. Once you've taught for so many years, the chances of you losing that job, unless you just did something criminal, are slim. You're almost guaranteed to keep that job, and it's a secure job in the minds of most people. They consider it to be job security. And most people do not want to give up job security. Most people do not want to give up a vested pension. And most people do not want to give up the health insurance and group benefits that they have. And for some people, even though people complain that the salary is low, once you've been there a few years, if you're looking at starting over, then you're going to have to take a pay cut.
Yeah.
So a lot of people do not. So between taking a pay cut, losing the benefits, and having to give up on the pension is not something that people would take lightly. That's a major decision.
Yeah.
Especially when they have children. So I think that, it's different.
Do you also think that part of it is them not even knowing like what else is out there, right? So for you, when you decided that you were going to, to transition, you started doing research and just like, okay, what else is there? Do you think that's part of it?
I think that part of it is not knowing definite. I think the fact that someone may not know exactly what they want to do, it may keep them from doing anything. Or they may have heard, like a lot of teachers will go into instructional design and they know they don't want to do instructional design. So since they don't want to do that, it's like, okay, there's nothing else that I can do.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of knowing that if in your heart, inside, in your gut, it's time to move, know that there is something for you to do. You may not be able to say it. You may not know everything that you need to know to actually get to the other side, but you know enough to take the next step. And the next step is to start looking to see what else is out there and start talking to other people about what they're doing.
Yeah. And in your book, you talk about career moves for teachers and other professionals, and you say strategies for successful job change. Talk about your book, Geraldine, and why did you write that? And if somebody, why should people read your book? How will that help them, especially these teachers who want to transition?
And I think for teachers or for other professionals, I focus on teachers because I was a teacher.
Right.
So that I came from a place where I was. But I also transitioned as an attorney, but I wanted to be very laser focused. The reason that I wrote the book is because I came up with what I believe to be it's a simple method that anyone can use to make a transition in anything. And that's basically to first decide what you want to do and making that decision, not on what someone else thinks you should do. Because everybody will tell you what they think you should do. If you don't want to teach, maybe someone may tell you change schools, change grade levels, but in your heart, you don't want to change, you want out. And when that's the case, you have to listen to what you want to do. So that's the first thing, decide what you want, and then to create a plan. Now, that is more than just creating a plan like you're going to create it and it's done. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some research. Some of the things that I suggest is to find someone who's doing what you think you may want to do, and then ask them, what does their job entail and how did they go about getting that job and what is required. So when I did, just like for me, when I decided that I was going to be an attorney, I didn't know what I would have to do first, second, and third, but I talked to someone who did it. So I knew I would have to take the LSAT. I knew I would have to practice or take a prep course for the LSAT, take the LSAT, apply to law school, apply for financial aid and get started. And I knew that each year I had to really, just work really, really hard to pass the courses, because someone told me you'll either flunk out or graduate in 3 years. There are no options. There are no retakes. There are no options. Now, I don't know if every school was like that, but at the University of Florida, that was it. Everyone said you're done in 3 years or you're done in 3 years. You
right. One way or another.
One way or the other. So I started gathering all of this information, and I just took it one step at a time. So obviously I didn't think about passing the bar exam the same year I thought about starting law school, because if I did, I probably would have never started. But you take it one step at a time. So you create a plan and then you implement the plan, and you implement it one step at a time. And if you have to course correct, if things are not working out the way that you wanted them to work out, then you can always change. For example, I changed from practicing criminal law. I was on a criminal trial. I really thought I would want to do trial work. But after going a whole year of having 20 or 30 cases set for trial at the beginning of the week and just constantly running around like I'm putting out fires, I'm like, this isn't as much fun as I thought. But I knew that there were other areas of law, and then I just started taking it one step at a time. So I was willing to transition to another area of the law. And then I also talk about overcoming obstacles. Mm-hmm. One of the things that happened my first year of law school, and I was getting ready for finals. And in law school, you take one exam, that exam is your grade. Like
that's it.
There's no redo. Like there are no redos in law school. And my father died suddenly of a massive heart attack.
Oh, wow.
And I just didn't think I would be able to get through. And in my book, I talk about the importance of having a support system before you take on a huge change or a huge project, whether it's going back to school, whether it's starting another job. It's important for you to have those support systems in place, because something may go wrong that you did not expect to go wrong. And in order to keep moving forward, you need to have those support systems in place. And so that's basically kind of it in a nutshell. Decide what you want, create a plan, take action by implementing the plan, and then course correct if needed, and be prepared for unforeseen obstacles. Yeah. And I think that can help no matter what, in every area of life. When you decide to do something different, that would help anybody. But I focused on teachers because I was a teacher.
Yeah. And I think that, when you talk about the steps that you just laid out for us, people get stuck in the plan creation. And then even if they do the plan, the implementation, right? Because we all can come up with our dreams and our goals, and I want to do this. And so many of us are enticed by this whole thing about manifesting, right? And the law of attraction. And it's like, yeah, those things are good, but you got to do the work, right? So, as you say, right? You have to figure out what is this plan, and that plan has to be strategic. And once you get that down, then you actually have to implement the things that you have put in that plan. And so, as I'm thinking about, the teachers and who you really have a heart for, and how do you get them to this space? Because I think you can get them to the visualization of it, maybe. And then I think it's hard, though, moving them along the steps, because of the things that you said, that you think that you have job security over here and that you have health insurance and you have all of those things. And one day, going back to that this can go across the board, I was having a conversation with a woman probably a couple of years ago, Tiffany Jufu. I never met her, but I had reached out to her on LinkedIn, and I was just having a conversation with her about, what I was doing. And this is when I was planning on transitioning from being a lawyer. And she said to me, she said, "Kelly, what is stopping you from just doing it?" And I said, "The thing that scares me most is financial insecurity." I said, "And I have my job and I get my paycheck. So, thinking about going out here and just doing whatever and hoping and praying and wishing." And she said, "Well, I want to tell you something." And I was like, "What?" She said, "You are the most financially insecure right now." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she was like, "At that job." She's like, "That is not financial security." She said, "Because when they're ready for you to go, they'll let you go." And she said, "If you have all of your eggs in that basket, they're going to pull that from you. And there's your financial security that you thought you had." And I never really thought about it in that way. And so, maybe as for the teachers too, to think about, one the thing she said to me was, you need to diversify your career portfolio. She said, just like you think about money, you have to diversify your career portfolio. And so, as I'm listening to you and thinking about the teachers, I think that might be a conversation around this. We all have this false sense of security at these jobs, right? And so if I was a teacher, Geraldine, and I'm listening to you and I'm like, yes, yes, and yes, I need to do everything that Geraldine, like, what would you say would be the first step for them in terms of trying to make this whole transition a reality? And I know that you just said like the steps, but what are, like, who should they go to? Where should they go research? What are some of those types of things they can do?
Fortunately, when I was making a career transition, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have Google. This was all before that. So I would say first and foremost, if fear is holding you back, especially, I call it fear of poverty. I actually wrote an ebook that people can get on my website. It's for free, GeraldineHogan.com. And I wrote Career Moves for Teachers, Overcoming These 3 Fears. And one of the fears is actually the fear of poverty. And I talk about what happens when you are continually going to a job that is, because after a while, it will begin to make you physically ill. So it's not even about financial security, because if you cannot physically go to that job, eventually your sick days will go away, and you will be getting leave without pay, and you will and you will not have that money, that security that you really hoped for. What I would suggest, wherever any of us are, even you and I, Kelly, don't think about job security. Think about employment security. And there are skills that we all have: the ability to work well with others, the ability to communicate and do things to enhance those skills, your communication skills. Think about where you are now. Don't say or do things. I mean, Kelly, I'm trying to think I don't think we ever tried a case against each other.
I don't think so.
Definitely in the same courtroom together. So we had to argue points to a judge before on cases where you were perhaps trying to do no bail and I was trying to don't let them out ever, but whatever. you have to think about how you're interacting with people where you are now, because the same people that you're working with now may be the same people that you see 10 years from now. And this is a case in point, Kelly and I working together now. So think about employment security. Think about starting to make sure that whatever you do, you're preparing for the next step. When I decided to apply for a judicial appointment, I could not have done it on my own. I am so not politically connected that it is not even funny. So I knew that other people were going to have to help me and speak up on my behalf. So I already knew I was working for the city of Miami before I received the judicial appointment. And I knew that there were people at the city, one of the largest cities in the state, who were connected with the governor at the time, who could put in a word for me, or the general counsel, or people who were in the general counsel's office. They could speak on my behalf. Of course, I have to have had good work ethic. I had to work hard and I had to know what I was doing, but that's not enough. In order for us to move ahead, we have to have help and we have to develop those relationships with other people. So in addition to having side jobs or additional skills that we can use to work somewhere else, we also need people. And we need to maintain those relationships with other people. So I think that there's a lot that we can do wherever we are right now, whether we know what we want to do next, or whether we're just trying to figure it out. Connect with people that you know. And I know how you feel about networking, Kelly, so I won't go there, but I will tell you,
no, but it's
networking is
so
more
important
than just showing up at an event. It's also maintaining those relationships where people will call. If you're talking, like if I'm talking to you, Kelly, and I say, Kelly, I think I want to go back and work, at the PD's office. I think I'm going to go switch. I'm not going back to the prosecutors. I'm not going back to the state attorney's office. Do you know anyone at the PD's office that I could call, at the public defender's office that I could call? It's those type of relationships where people will be there to help you, to put in a word for you, or to let you know. Oftentimes jobs become available and they're not advertised. So having those connections with other people will actually give you information about a potential job that you didn't even know existed. So I think that it's sort of a lot of things working together, but it's not necessarily knowing that what you're going to do next, but connecting, keep maintaining those relationships with people who will let you know what's going on. And case in point, when I applied for a judicial appointment twice. The first time I didn't get it. But the reason I applied was because someone approached me and said, I think you should apply. I was like, why? And I even started asking other people, this position is opening up. Are you interested? I was trying to get other people to apply for it. And then I applied and I didn't get it. But then I knew there was another position that was opening up in Broward County. And I said, that's even better, because I was litigating cases for the city of Miami, which is one of the largest employers in the city, one of them. And it's like, I'm going to have to recuse myself on a lot of cases if I get that position. If I go to Broward County, I don't have that problem. So it worked out perfect, but I would not have even considered it if someone had not put the thought in my head, I think you would be good at this.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that we could start asking our friends and people who know us. What do you see in me that I do well? Like, what is it that you think I would be good at doing? And getting feedback from other people. So we can't do it in isolation all by ourselves.
Yeah. I think that's important. I was laughing, you're talking about me and networking. I just hate I don't like the rules. I don't like the rules around networking. I want to break those rules and just be like, can I just ask you what I need? Can I just go right in and, forget all of the small talk? I'm not very good at small talk, but I'm glad that you brought up the thing about building relationships and, you never know the person that you worked with or you met however many years ago. I always say that, as a lawyer, the regret that I have as a lawyer is that no one taught me right? Up until probably 10 years ago, maybe less than that. No, probably less than 10 years ago. No one really drilled into me the importance of like building business, right? And the way that you build business as a book of business as a lawyer is really to develop all of these relationships. And I think that I'm glad that you brought that up, because as we build those relationships, people will start to connect the dots, right? And sometimes we don't know the dots, but other people see them and can help you to connect those dots. And it's not that you do what people want you to do, but sometimes people see things in you that you don't see in yourself. And so being able to have those types of relationships where someone can say to you, like, for example, Geraldine, this is opening up. I think that you should consider it, right? And just opening your mind to something different, to the potential. And I think that's what, when you started talking about the teachers, it is opening their mind to the potential that there's something else out there that would provide them this quote unquote security that they feel, being in this profession, but in a profession that at some point for some of them is eating away at them.
And I think that's what's so sad to see, when people allow themselves to stay in that space when they are so unhappy. Because like you said a few moments ago, it's not just that you're unhappy. There is an energy that you're putting out. And a lot of people, especially the people that you're teaching, will feel that. And you're causing them harm. And I think that that's why I have such a passion for, not necessarily that I want to cause anyone to stop teaching when they know that's what they want to do, but also when you know it's what you do not want to do, or you no longer want to do it, to know that there are options for you.
Yeah. And if somebody's listening, Geraldine, and they're like, oh my gosh, that is me. I am the teacher that you are speaking of, who needs to go, but not sure where I need to go. And they want to talk to you, Miss Geraldine. How could they reach you? And what are the types of things that you could help them with if they said, if they raised their hand and said, yes, you were talking to me?
I would say start with my website. I do have a free book to help to kind of guide you through the first step, which I believe is overcoming fear. And you can also connect with me on my website, because you will have my phone number and my address where you can connect with me directly, and we can have a conversation, and I can definitely, go deeper into some of the things that I did and going through that process. So by all means, feel free to reach out.
Yeah. And I think that that's important. And, as you talk with Geraldine, for you teachers out there, and like Geraldine said, her book came from a heart as a teacher. However, the things that she laid out in that book can apply to any one of us, any role that, anything that we need to be in a transition around, or trying to clear our mindset and create a plan. And maybe you're not even in a transition. Maybe it's that you want to add something on to what you're doing, right?
Absolutely.
To your life. You can still use those steps. So, Geraldine says she has her free ebook. So make sure that you get the ebook. You're getting this from a teacher, lawyer, judge. So you know. It's good. It's good. And your book, Geraldine, where can they find your book?
The book is available on Amazon.com, and there's also a link on my website to the book as well.
Okay. And then we'll make sure that all of the links are on your episode so that they can connect with you. And that we talk about leveraging and ladies who leverage all the time. So I want to ask you, because you've done a lot of leveraging, what does leverage mean to you? And why do you think it's important for, especially women, right, as we move through our careers? Why do you think it's important for us to leverage?
Because we can get further along the way in whatever it is that we're working on. I think we need to not only leverage our skills, but to realize that we're limited, and that other people may be good at doing something that we're not good at doing. And they may even be good at seeing things that we don't see. And then the knowledge, people know different things. They have different information. Like I can tell you like I was telling you about workers' comp law. I had a case once. I did a mediation with a case that involved employment law and workers' comp, and they're different. And I thought about you during that entire mediation. I was like, maybe I should call Kelly, because this is, this is not workers' compensation. So I knew enough. I mean, I did take employment law, thank God, in law school. So I was able to kind of get through it, because the primary issue was workers' compensation. But the reality is we don't know everything about everything. So being able to connect with people, especially women, who know more things that we may not know. And I think that's so important, especially when people are considering making any type of major change in their life and they're gathering information, talking to people and being able to know the ins and outs. Like, we can read on Google, we can read articles, but if you want to know what something is really about, find someone who's done it, find someone who's gone through what it is that you may be considering going through. So I think that having other people to work together, and even the mastermind, the meeting together and bouncing ideas off of other people, you start to see things that you didn't think about, you didn't realize. So I think that's definitely important, having an opportunity to learn and get input from other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
I think you're so right about that, because because I know nothing. I would be like you if it was a workers' comp. I'd be like, yeah, no, not me. And I've had people, when I was still practicing, people would call me, well, you do employment law and this happened at work. I'm like, yeah, but I said, there are people who that's all they do. Like, that is their specialty and that is not mine. Right. So I think, you're right in that having more people around you, having people who have done the things that you want to do and have been where you want to go, because it collapses time for you too, right? It saves you money because you don't make the same mistakes. They can share their mistakes. So,
Absolutely.
So I'm so glad that you were here, Miss Geraldine. And as I said, funny how life happens, because we never thought that this is where we would be at this moment in life. But I am so glad that we are still on this journey together. And so make sure that you get Geraldine's book. It's Career Moves for Teachers and Other Professionals, Strategies for a Successful Job Change. You can get the book on Amazon, or you can get it through the link on her website, which is GeraldineHogan.com. And for those of you who are contemplating a transition, are in the midst of a transition, you're not really sure what to do, please make sure that you go to Geraldine's website and download her free ebook. Because as Geraldine says, part of this whole journey in transitioning is getting your mind right? So getting your mindset and overcoming those fears, and that will help you to move successfully into this transition. And Geraldine, I did want to ask you this before we go, though, because we talked about, you going into the practice of law later in life, and also, after having a full career. So basically a second career. For those who are thinking, too old for this. Like, I already did one career. I can't possibly start over at this age. What would you say to them?
I would say you definitely can start over. And the thing that a lot of people may not realize is that being older is a plus. You bring things to the workforce that other people don't realize. For example, Kelly, when I started as a prosecutor, and a lot of young people their mindset was just different. And our older people have the wisdom of handling conflict a little bit differently. We've gone through enough to know that what someone says is not as important as it would have been if I were 10 years younger. So I think that a lot of employers even realize that there is a benefit to hiring people who are older and who have diverse backgrounds, people who are not all in the same area or the same career. When you've had a different career, you bring a different perspective and a variety of perspectives to the workforce. So I would definitely say consider being older a blessing. It's a benefit. And the fact that you have had a career before or that you're a little bit older is something that can actually work in your favor. And I would just say, know how to position it so that when you're interviewing, you will know how to say, I know that I'm older, but no, I bring a lot more to the table because I'm older, because I have a diverse background in terms of careers. So I think that that is a benefit that people may not even realize that they have.
Leverage that age, right?
Absolutely.
Leverage it. Well, Geraldine, thank you so much for being on the Ladies Who Leverage podcast, and for also being not just a member of Ladies Who Leverage, but an investor, somebody who has supported my vision around Ladies Who Leverage. I thank you for that. And for the women who are listening, if you are a full-time entrepreneur, a woman with a side hustle, or somebody who's thinking about, is it time for me to transition? And you are looking for a group of women, global community of women who will support you, who will hold you accountable, and yes, correct you when necessary, then I would invite you to join us in Ladies Who Leverage. You can go to teamlwl.com. That's TEAM as in Mary, LWL.com to join us. And as always, every Monday at 9 a.m., we drop new episodes for our Ladies Who Leverage podcast. So please subscribe so that you don't ever miss one of the episodes, and look out for all of the amazing things that are going to come with my new book, Unapologetic AF, 34 Ways to Unleash Your Inner Badass. So if you want to know about that, go to kellysbook.club and you can sign up to get updates. Thanks for joining us. This podcast is brought to you by Lady Lawyer Media. If you're a badass woman who's ready to take action to live life unapologetically AF, then you need to join our global community on Facebook, Ladies Who Leverage. And remember to subscribe to our podcast. And until next time, let's collabosource, strategize, and monetize.